What's going on, guys? My name is RagingRaptor and today I want to show you a armor guide on the Turtle Mark 1. As a quick little disclaimer, I used to do this video a little bit different, but I figured they are maybe a tiny touch too long. Hence why I decided to try to condense them down into a more viewable 10-minute format where I am using more editing to make them more or easier to understand. We are going to have several tanks fighting off against the Turtle Mark 1. And if you enjoy today's format, let me know in the comment section below, and so I can adapt and evolve. The first tank which is going to fight on level ground against the Turtle Mark 1 will be the E25. I chose the E25 as it has the penetration comparable to tier 6 tanks, as well as a great DPM and an accurate gun, so making follow-up shots onto weak spots a lot easier for me to provide to you than vice versa. The E25 has 150mm of standard round penetration and 194mm of gold round penetration, and both rounds are effectively too weak against the lower plate of the Turtle Mark 1. On the flat ground, the Turtle Mark 1's lower plate is around 188mm of armor thick. That is a very strong value, and against low tier opponents, the Turtle Mark 1 definitely is frontally a beast and something you don't really want to face off against. The couple in general is very small. However, even though it is small, it is easy to penetrate. For lower tiers, not so much, because with the added angle, the armor still becomes to be rather thick. The cupola armor will be around 152mm, and it can go up much more depending at what angle you are looking at. We will see this in a later clip where we put the Turtle Mark 1 in a hold down position using its 10 degrees of gun depression. The only weak spot frontally, and this also very much depends on how the Turtle Mark 1 is playing, is the rangefinders, or the ears, if you want to say so. Those ears are kind of the same weak spot as the Type 5 Heavy has. Only the Turtle Mark 1's ear are 50mm thick, and behind them is a 0mm plate. But it is important that you have to hit them at an angle. Otherwise, you are not able to pen them properly because you won't hit the armor laying behind them. The armor is just a 0mm circle on the side's armor. And again, this is very important. If you don't hit this 0mm circle, you are not going to do damage and you will just bounce off the thicker side plate or not even hit the armor whatsoever. But now, let's move on to the hull down. Hull down, it's pretty much the same story for the E25. Just the cupola gets even thicker and even smaller and harder to hit. So if you are standing hull down in a tier 6 matchmaking or in a 357 matchmaking, your top tier, the low tier tanks will not have fun playing against the Turtle Mark 1. There are only a selected few tier 7 and tier 6 tanks which can penetrate the Turtle Mark 1's armor when he's standing hull down, but in general, the superstructure is a no-go for any tier 7 and tier 6 tank. When we look at the side armor, it's also fairly thick. You have to keep in mind that even angling the tank makes the armor even better. But it takes away effectiveness at later tiers because later tiers have enough penetration to penetrate its lower plate. But looking at the sidearm, it's important that you focus on the engine part, because these superstructure sides are still 152mm thick, except where the tracks are. The tracks are slightly better or less armored because behind them is only a 101mm of armor. But the tracks are 30mm thick, and you, depending where you're shooting, get an additional 6mm of spaced armor of the little side skirts, which is they are modeled. Next up, we have the Jack Tiger 88. Once again, Or now, in a little bit different episode, the Jack Tiger 88 can penetrate the lower plate rather easily when we are looking at the Turtle Mark 1 without any problem. Just straight up frontal to it, and it's a pretty easy penetrating hit. You have 203 millimeters of penetration, it has 188 millimeters of effective armor, means you will have no issues. The superstructure and the upper front plate are still rather thick. 152 millimeters at a great angle, you are most likely not going to hit through. However, the cupola right now got much easier to penetrate with the Jack Tiger 88 because you have enough penetration, so it will, if you hit it properly, it will be an easy pen. The gun shield and the armor laying around it are still a taboo for you because they are, simply speaking, too hard for you, even if you would shoot premium rounds. If the turtle drives around at an angle, still the effective armor of the lower plate will get better, but it won't be enough for holding up tier 8 counterparts. Still, cupola will be your go-to weak spot. When the Turtle Mark 1 is standing hold down and playing hold down properly, it is basically for a Jack Tiger 88 impossible to kill him. Phil even told me, and thanks to Phil for letting me use his turtle and his time, he told me that he had even no problems hitting my upper front plate, which is an easy pen hit for him. And he could stay hold down. It was basically impossible for me to hit the cupola. And other than that, even with gold ammunition, I had no chance whatsoever to penetrate him. The only thing, once again, is as soon as Phil is angling his tank a little bit, using the side degrees of the gun, you could hit the ears and penetrate them there. But it's very unreliable and depends how the enemy is playing. So if the enemy is playing, in quotation marks, smart to make more effective armor on his frontal plate, exposing his side weak spot, then you have a chance. But it's very, very hard. You can hit those ears with HE. They do a little bit of damage, but it's a little bit of damage. Like, it's not a lot. One thing which I have to point out, if you are standing above the Turtle Mark 1, it is more effective to shoot on the upper front plate than the superstructure or the lower front plate. Because the angles of the upper front plate are much steeper, and hence when you're standing above them, they lose their magic. It's the same thing with the 279 early. As soon as you're standing above it, it has much, much weaker armor. The next tank I choose to take is the STG, because it has 219mm of penetration and should compare to tanks like the Defender, like general tier 8 heavy tanks. Plus, I wanted to show you later on a position to overmatch the turtle when it stands hold down. So, the lower plate, once again, is no issue whatsoever with the AP gun. The upper front plate and the upper superstructure are still relatively thick, so they are a no-go. However, if you are once again standing above the Turtle Mark 1 and having 200mm of penetration, you won't have an issue penetrating him. If you're shooting gold, there's not much difference, except you can get lucky to penetrate beside the gun mantlet, or be lucky to penetrate the thick armor stripe. But again, you have to be lucky for this to work. So keep that in mind, that you have to be lucky. And your lower plate, you are a monstrosity in tank form. And the name is a little bit misleading. Yes, it is a turtle, but oh boy, it's a monster turtle when it comes to the armor. The 10 degrees of gun depression make things a lot easier and much better to use your great armor. It is important to note, however, if you are using your gun depression and you are showing your frontal road wheel as of this, keep in mind that every gun which has 120mm of caliber size will have overmatch underneath your superstructure. This is why I was able to penetrate the Turtle Mark 1 with D-track and damage, even though he was standing hull down. That's very, very important. The same thing goes for its roof. It is 150 millimeters thick and you can penetrate it rather easily. It's 44 millimeters thick, so a 150 millimeter gun has overmatch on the roof. Even further back, it's once again 38 millimeters, so no big issue for a 120 millimeter gun. If you are going for the ears because he is hiding his road wheels and lower plate, keep in mind that you can shoot at them with HE, but you will not do full penetration damage. You will do around the half amount of damage you do with your HE, which is decent. You could see 250 damage roughly. That is very, very decent. An angled road wheel will be very hard to penetrate. Once again, 30 millimeters track armor, 101 millimeters of lower side armor, and as soon as you're not able to hit the superstructure from underneath, it will be very, very tricky to penetrate. The last tank for today is the T57 Heavy. I decided to take the tank because it has an average tier 10 penetration and it has one of the best DPMs on tier 10 on heavy tanks, so this is why I took him. Now with the T57 Heavy on flat surface, you can penetrate the thick frontal plate and the upper plate. It's not a real big issue anymore. In general, against tier 10s, the total armor starts to die down, which is understandable. It's a tier 8 tank, it shouldn't be an impenetrable fortress for even tier 10 vehicles, but it is also something you have to keep in mind. One thing which is important, that still the gun mantlet with the additional side armor will be not, as soon as you hit the gun mantlet, you won't be able to penetrate, most likely with a tier 10 tank, because the armor will simply be too thick. The armor beside the gun mantlet is semi-thick enough, but please do not count on it. If you get a lucky stray bounce, it's great. If not, happens. 267 millimeters of armor is not that good, or is not enough, to be honest. If the Turtle Mark 1 is standing hull down, that's a good thing for the Turtle Mark 1, because then you will have a decent chance to bounce some tier 10 rounds. But you have to work for it, like you very much have to work for it. Because you have to wiggle a little bit, you have to maybe even over angle, in the sense of that you drive up further to lessen the, to not even be able to shoot at the enemy, so you would need even more gun depression. It sounds weird, it's a concept you will use on a WZ113 GFT TD on tier 10, because its armor is not as effective as it should be. But yeah, in general, against tier 10 tanks, you should search better options, other tanks you could use your armor against, because tier 10 tanks and most tier 9 heavies or tier 9 tanks in general won't have a big issue penetrating the frontal plate armor of the Turtle Mark 1. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, let me know in the comment section below. Was it a good format? Was it a bad format? Do you want to see different tanks analyzed like this? Then let me know in the comment section below again. If you're new to the channel, feel free to subscribe. And as always, thank you so much for your attention. Cheers, guys.